Welcome back.
We did it.
We did it, everyone.
Not only did we get here and sit down and say hi to you guys, but we also hiked Half Dome this past weekend.
Yeah, we did. We literally hiked. That's right. We hiked 30 miles in 2 days, which I don't think me, you, or Phil have ever done that. I mean, maybe Phil has, but you and I have never done that.
Yeah, I think he has, but that was probably the most physically demanding weekend I've had. I mean, obviously, like we're pretty athletic. We do other activities that would require a lot from us.
Yeah.
And like, for example, going out on the boat all day, Saturday and Sunday, like the sun is draining, you're exercising, like it's a lot, but there's something so different about hiking.
Yeah, because it's nonstop. Like on the boat, at least you could chill and like sit in the sun, but hiking, you're literally just walking for like 8 hours. Yeah.
Which we really love walking.
No, hiking is my favorite activity. I'm not complaining at all.
Yeah.
It was really one of the best weekends of my life, honestly.
I'm so glad to hear it.
Yeah.
It's I'm paying for it now just with like an ingrown toenail and some things.
Do you have that?
Yeah, look how red that one is. The second one.
Oh my God. People are like, yes.
No, I've been working on it all morning.
Dude.
On YouTube. But it's so worth it. Yosemite is so beautiful. I've never been there. You went as a kid.
Yes, but not enough to remember the beauty of it. I mean, I do remember it and it was really fun, but I just have a new appreciation for it.
Yeah, because when you see it as an adult, I just feel like you're so much more aware of what you're even looking at and how grand it really is to see something like that.
Yeah, it's so true.
Like when you're a kid, your imagination's really big, and then so you're like, oh yeah, like
waterfalls,
I think about this stuff.
big rock mountains,
Yeah.
cool. Now I'm like, oh my God, I live in a city sort of by the beach and we don't see these huge mountaintops surrounding us, but there you're just looking up the whole time.
Even like the smells there.
Yeah.
You don't realize how much your senses get turned on when you're in a place like that. And also because everything else, like all of our responsibilities and stuff like that, like all of our daily stuff was just kind of wiped clean. And it was just us, what we were hiking in that moment, and then each other. Like that's all we had.
Yeah. And I remember driving into Yosemite and I was just looking and I was sitting in the back and I don't remember exactly what I said to you guys, but I was like, it just feels like right to be here. Like it makes my heart happy to like be amongst nature like this.
And that, I don't know, I was telling Philip, there's something about that valley in specific that feels like it's hugging you. It feels more intimate. Like I didn't realize how cozy it would feel to be there. Mm-hmm. But it is. Like in my head, I thought Yosemite is this like vast valley with these huge rock formations like Half Dome and El Cap, and like it's got to be massive. And when you're driving through the valley itself, El Cap is right here. The other side of the mountain is right there. And like you're kind of sandwiched between, and it just makes you feel like you're being hugged by the valley.
That's cute. Yeah, absolutely.
So there were times where I didn't feel like I was being hugged, and we'll get into that further.
Yeah. So where do we want to start with? Just the first hike that we did?
Yeah. I mean, I think, yeah, go ahead. Get started on it.
Well, I feel like with regard to the layout of this episode, it's not just, the Conscious Cowboys telling you how amazing Yosemite is and that's all we're going to talk about. Like there were several lessons that we learned on this trip, which I think is indicative of travel. Like there's contention, there's, high emotions and really fun times. And that's what this episode is going to be about.
Yeah.
Plus, obviously, us detailing how amazing Yosemite is and telling everyone that they need to go.
Yeah. And I just think it's so funny. Like you have these visions of what your vacation's going to be like, right? You think, okay, I'm going with my best friend and for me, my fiance, and I'm going to a national park that I've never been to. And I'm going to go do these amazing hikes. And like, it's going to be such a dream. Nothing's going to go wrong. I'm going to have the best time of my life. And that's just not how it goes. Like, that's just not reality.
Yeah.
Like there's always going to be factors that kind of fucking throw you off and you've got to figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's cute that you think that. Like, I like that you think that
oh yeah.
way.
I'm clocking out. I'm going on this like amazing weekend and like, I'm prepared. Like nothing's going to go wrong and things go wrong. And you have a really deep look at yourself when you're in those moments. And I'll go into that further as we continue.
Yeah, I was talking to my dad and I was telling him, I was just like, yeah, for some reason, when I think, I don't know if I've always been like this, but with travel specifically, I never think about the trip too far. Like, I don't like have expectations on it whatsoever. It's just kind of like, oh, this is so cool. I get to do this cool thing. Like, let's see what happens. You're obviously prepared for stuff, you know, but for the most part, I'm just like aloof to
And
it.
that's good because then
Maybe.
I think, I mean, the more you think about things in like a premeditative state, sometimes it's really beneficial. Like I know that there's a lot of professional athletes that prepare for their big game by thinking it through, and in their head they've already won.
Right.
So in a sense, like, not that we're talking about vacationing of like, oh, you think about it and you've already won your vacation, but it's like we were going and doing some really challenging things.
Yes.
So if you thought about it in that way of like, I've already in my head conquered the cables at Half Dome. I know when I get there, I'm going to crush it. And even though I might feel like a sense of fear at the time, I've already in my head done it, so I can do it.
But then maybe if I think about it, if I'm really overanalyzing it, doing that sometimes can set up for disappointment because you've played it up into your head of like, oh my God, I finished it already. Like, let's fucking go. I'm going to do it. And then you get there and you're just like, oh no, it's playing out differently than I imagined. Like, this is not good.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. And luckily, yeah, I mean, well, do we just even want to get into it? Okay.
Yeah,
So I guess on Saturday, we got there Friday. Saturday, Phil suggested that we hike Yosemite Falls, and Tess and I just blindly going into it because obviously we trust Phil and it's a hike and we have legs and we're so fortunate to be able to walk. And we started at probably 8:30 a.m. and the high that day was going to be about 90 degrees Fahrenheit. And so we started, and not getting this hike was pretty challenging. Like, it was gnarly, and you're on rocks the whole time and you're going uphill for most of it. And it ended up being 10 and a half miles. And yeah, it was something else.
Yeah, I feel like, what does the sign say at the bottom? It's like 3.5 miles is what
Yeah,
it says.
it says 3.5 miles to the top. So
it says Yosemite Falls Loop 3.5. Now, if you're like us, okay, I didn't think it was going to be 3.5 total, but like that sign does to me indicate if it says loop, that's.
Did it say loop?
I'm pretty
I didn't
sure.
even look at
or
the
maybe
sign.
I fucking blacked out and I was like, yeah, that says loop. Here I go. I knew that we were going for a hike. I knew that it was going to be challenging. That's what we're there to do. We're there to challenge and hike that weekend. I am like, I've analyzed myself so much from this past weekend because as strong as I am and as capable as I am, there are times when I get so blocked by my body's signals that I like shut down. And Saturday was like the first glimmer of it. I found myself really struggling in the heat, and like towards the top, we had done probably, I don't know, I don't want to exaggerate, but the amount of switchbacks we've done up the mountain were so many by that point.
Oh my gosh. And
like
the
it
sun
was
just beating
endless.
down. There was actually no shade. We're not doing any justice to this hike. It was really spectacular. Once you got to the top, you felt accomplished.
Yeah.
You're really excited. You ate lunch up there. The wind is blowing. You hear it through the trees, the scent of the pine. It was glorious, but it was also quite challenging.
But like, you have to realize that the journey is so much of what you're experiencing. Like, it's not just, okay, we hiked to Yosemite Falls. How cool. Look at the view from the top. Isn't that amazing? Let's take a couple photos. Like, that is part of it. But the other part of it too is getting up there.
Right. It's the process of it.
It's the process. And sometimes it's so beautiful. And there were points where I was looking up and I'm seeing this huge granite wall that's like so much bigger than what you can even comprehend. And you're like, you round the corner and it's just a wall of rock as far up as you can see. And you're like, that is insane. And then at the same time, you're like, but I feel so challenged right now. And like, I am struggling and it doesn't seem like anybody else is struggling. And then I'm getting more in my head about it because obviously like we have expectations of ourselves. And then when you don't match it or you start comparing yourself to the group, you're like, oh my God.
Right.
Something's wrong here.
Yeah. So Tess and I had different experiences, not only on the Yosemite Falls hike, but also hiking Half Dome. So I don't know if you want to do, like, should I just explain also?
Yeah.
Okay. So on that hike, yes, really challenging. And again, going in with actually no expectations of it, besides the fact that I have all of this backing of like, I've prepared for this essentially my whole life. Like, I've wanted to go to Half Dome since my parents hiked it. They've hiked it probably like 3 or 4 times. And I've looked at photos of it. I've wanted to do it since I was like 10 years old. I'm an avid hiker. Like, I hike almost every day. So that's also partly why I don't think I am hesitant. Like, when I'm going on a hike, I'm like, yeah, Phil, let's just go here. Let's do this, whatever. And because I know that like I really trust my body and I've built it up to be strong and like mentally tough. So then when I'm on that hike, it's like an amalgamation of everything I've ever done leading up into this point with regard to training my body. So then when I'm feeling, you know, the heat or like sensation, I'm like, I go to hot yoga. Like, I know what this is. I know my body's limits. And not to say that like, if you're having a hard time on that hike, you don't know your body's limits and you're not like adept at knowing that, you know? But for me, it just felt like really good because I was like, okay, I'm feeling these sensations. Like, I have it in my head of like, this is just a sensation of like, oh, my knee's hurting a little bit, or I actually physically fell on that hike because I was trying to carry back this like stick that we actually left in the car. But we were trying to carry back this log that had moss on it, and I fell and like bruised my leg, but whatever. So I just felt like this challenge it's a sensation. The heat is a sensation. I'm not putting like a story to it. It just like is what it is. So like, let's keep going. And I feel like I felt very strong on that hike. And it's interesting to like be on the hike with other people who are having different experiences, because then it's like somehow like you obviously think about yourself in that, and like you compare yourself to the others in your group. And then I start to feel like guilty almost that like I am forging ahead. You know, does that make sense? Like, I felt guilty because I was like, I don't want to like feel like I'm leaving them behind. Like, I usually feel like that a lot on hikes, and I don't like to make people feel like I'm like rushing them or like I think I'm better because like I'm ahead. It's just like, no, my body feels really strong, so I just need to like go ahead and like push through. And luckily I feel like we had that communication in a way where it was like, okay, if Tess is feeling tired or like I'm feeling more energized, like Madison, just go to the top and like we'll meet you there. So then luckily we had that, and I went to the top and I got to, the cell service was incredible up there, which is crazy because it was horrible on the floor. And I got to talk to my dad and my cousin Kelly, and it was just like very cool to be able to like share that experience with them too. Of like, yeah, I'm up on top of the mountain and the wind is blowing. Like, can you hear it on the phone? Like, it was so special. And I met up with Phil and Tess, like when I started going back down to try to catch them. And then we hiked to the very top, which we did plan on only going 6 miles. We ended up going 10 and a half. So that just was it. But yeah.
Yeah. And then what was awesome was we got down from that hike, and it was like heat of the day, probably 2:30 p.m. And we're like, okay, we need to cool down. Let's go swimming. And on the valley floor, there's this beautiful river. It's the Merced, and it goes through like front to back. And it's the clearest, crispest, coolest water. And you just basically right at the base of the hike, you cross the street and it's right there.
Yeah.
And it's really special because everyone is just like out enjoying nature. Not a lot of cell phones out. You're surrounded by these insane rock formations. The sun is shining, birds, you can smell the pine, you can smell the wood chips on the floor. It just is like the most immersive experience ever. And it's so rewarding after you've done that challenge and you've been like sweating the whole time. And for me, like I felt that like that boundary I was hitting where I'm like, dude, I don't know how much more of this I can do. Especially like on the way down, like you think, okay, well, you get up to the top and like, okay, you did the hardest part, but then you have to go back down, and that's amazing too. I'm not trying to like make the whole hike sound like it's this miserable experience, but again, I'm trying to really paint the picture of like, you hiked all this way up, this basically like straight vertical switchback, and then you've got to go back down, and it's just really taxing on your body.
Oh, yeah.
So then when you get to the river and you're swimming, it's such a reward. And you're like, oh my God, like I could just do this for the next 5 hours.
Yeah.
And we did.
It just felt, we did. And it felt just really natural. And the water was ice cold, which was refreshing, especially with the contrast of the heat and doing that hard hike. And I think Tess and I both adore being outside a lot. So that was just a good finish to the day. And that day I stepped on a stick that was growing out of the ground, like a literal root, and I bruised the bottom of my foot. And I'm like thinking that night, like, oh my God, we hike Half Dome tomorrow. I'm going to wake up and it's going to be like exploding, like a puncture wound. Like, what am I going to do? I came all this way. And it just ended up being bruised, which was totally fine. And I learned to walk on it, but shit happens. And that's the hike I fell on, but it's okay.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's just like, is traveling to me, is like, stuff happens that you're just like, why on this? Like, this literally never happens. When was the last time I fell? I'm like, and I bruised my foot. But yeah, it just adds to the experience.
We also brought a camping stove up there, and we grilled steaks down by the water. And like, just picture it. You've got El Cap behind you, which is like the tallest rock formation in the valley. And then you've got a meadow behind you, this cold running stream that's crystal clear. You've got your best friend, your fiance there, grilling up a hot steak and just sitting underneath the sun. And there's like no care in the world. Like, that's all you have to deal with that day.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is so lovely.
No, it was definitely really special.
And then we woke up.
That's a sexy moment.
That is a sexy moment.
We could add to that.
It was all of our, like, we recapped the weekend on a drive home, and it was all of our, like, one of our top moments of the weekend was just that. And then we went to bed because we had to wake up really early.
Yeah, we got up at 4 a.m. on Sunday in preparation to hike.
Yeah, made a little breakfast and then left the hotel by 5:30. Got to the hike around 6, started hiking at 6:15 because we had to wait a little bit for the sun to come up because it was pretty dark. Like, as we were driving through the valley, because we were on one end of Yosemite, you have to drive to the other end essentially to get to Half Dome from where we were. So the whole drive there, it was just like this calm, peaceful drive. We were listening to like really relaxing music.
Yeah, I think that was the only time. Were we listening to music?
Yeah.
When were we listening to Drake?
When we were going to hike Yosemite Falls.
Okay. Because I was like, really didn't listen to a lot of music like at all on the road trip. Like, we drove there. It was about 7 hours and we listened to zero music, even on the way home.
No music.
Yeah. So like, I just remember for some reason, like listening to Nonstop by Drake.
Yeah. But then we, on our way to Half Dome, we listened to Neil Young.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if you remember that.
I do remember. We're listening to Old Man. I think just like maybe it blurred in my head, but yeah. So
we're driving through. It's still dark. The sun is like barely coming up. So the like night sky started getting like more, I don't know, like purpley and blue. And then we started walking again. It's like just the dawn. It's cold, which is like nice. I mean, Madison doesn't love the cold, but I do. So it was nice because I just knew like, okay, on our way down, it's going to be so hot. And so just enjoy the contrast of this moment where it's cold and you feel like not sweaty. We got all the way up to Vernal Falls, which is beautiful. You keep going past, and the hike for Half Dome is really, I think, besides mileage, it's pretty attainable. Like, if you're not very conditioned, getting up to the subdome, which is right before the cable climb itself, that's pretty doable. Like, we saw all different types of people climbing up or walking up there. And like, obviously some people take it much slower than others.
Yeah. Because I would say that hiking up to Vernal Falls, like the initial ascent is pretty gnarly.
Yeah. It's steep and it's switchbacks.
Yeah.
But a lot of it's paved. It's not very like technical. So it's doable. It's if you're not conditioned, it will wear you down a little bit. But the whole thing itself, if you're like good on your 2 feet, you'll be fine.
Yeah, because I also say all the time, like, hiking is essentially just walking, and we walk all the time.
Yeah.
So it's definitely not something to like build up in your head. So I agree, it is definitely attainable.
I feel like if you don't do a lot of incline though, that's where it would kick your butt.
Oh yeah.
Because walking flat is so different from walking up. Like, even a 8% grade, you're just like, okay, I feel my heartbeat. Like, I feel winded. And you might not experience that as much. I'm sure you felt a little bit, but for someone who doesn't train like that regularly, like I was thinking, thank God I've been training on the stair climber recently, because there's not like a lot of hikes around us where it's consistently uphill for that long.
Right.
So I've been pushing myself on the stair climber to try to build up that endurance of like, okay, learn how to deep breathe while you continue climbing these fucking stairs, because that's essentially what you're about to do all weekend.
Totally.
So it helped. And there's like this beautiful part. Once you get past Vernal Falls, it kind of flattens out into this wooded area. And you get this moment of like, oh, okay, like I'm not quite there. Yeah, I'm not quite there, but like I just get to chill and walk pretty flat for a little bit. And then you start going up again. And then you round this corner and you get to the subdome. Let's talk about that.
Well, to be fair, when we're walking, and again, it's not like, I mean, I don't think any of us really, Phil had already hiked Half Dome, so he knew what we were getting into. I've never really looked it up, maybe like a blog post of like what to bring to hike the cables. So I've heard, oh yeah, the granite steps going up the subdome, that's the most challenging part. And I'm thinking about what in my head, my rudimentary thinking of what the granite steps look like. I'm actually picturing like a staircase with perfect granite steps that are just going in between the mountain and you're just hiking. And so I'm looking up at the mountain and I see people literally scaling this the subdome, which is like a huge rock mountain, and they're scaling it without holding on to anything. And I'm like, oh my God, you walk up there? And Phil's like, yeah, uh-huh. And I was like, oh shit. All right. Like I did not know that. So we start climbing, and I am not afraid of heights. Like I didn't know that I wasn't afraid of heights. I was very indifferent to heights. So I'm walking, I'm like, okay, these stairs are hard. Our legs already feel like cement. Thank God we had snacks at the bottom of that, like maybe 40 minutes before that. And so I'm like, okay, I'm powered by like dates right now. Like I can do this. I'm walking up the steps, and then there's no more steps. Then it just starts going up the rock face of it. And you're just like I started laughing. I'm walking up it, and I was by myself at that point, and I'm walking it, and there are these people walking with their walking sticks. And I looked over at them and I was like, this is really challenging. And then they're like, yeah. And I was like, my parents have told me about this several times and they never mentioned this part. They're like, you got it. It's so easy. And I'm walking up it just laughing to myself because I was like, dude, this is not easy. Like, this is really challenging. Really cool that people do this. And I'm on this right now, but like, let's fucking go. Like, I was like, thank you, body. We got this. And so, yeah.
Mm-hmm. On Yosemite Falls, I had no issue whatsoever with the height. The whole hike up, I'm looking out and I'm like, got it. Like, that doesn't scare me at all. In fact, it's one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. Mm-hmm. We get to the top and I'm walking to the actual edge of Yosemite Falls with my phone and like taking videos, looking straight down the mountain, like the sheer cliff that drops to the valley floor. Didn't bother me at all. I'm looking across the valley, seeing Half Dome. I'm like, it's taller, but it's like not, in my brain right now, it's not that much taller. So I'm feeling so confident walking up to Half Dome. I'm like, I've got this.
Yeah.
I'm someone who's seen photos of it. I've like rehearsed it in my head. I know what's going on. Okay. We get to the subdome, as Madison explained. That's not what I ever saw. Like you say, like you didn't really like see photos of it or anything. So in your head, you pictured like a staircase. I had seen photos, but they did absolutely no justice to what the fuck I was looking at in real life. I'm like, no, this is so much more than I was anticipating. Mm-hmm. And yesterday's experience was I had no problem with height, but then all of a sudden I'm like super freaked out. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, I don't even see how we're going to get to the top. And Philip's like, look, it's kind of like zigzags across. And in my like past experience, when I'm looking at photos of it, they say like these granite steps, like these massive granite steps, right? And so what I've seen, it looks like these big boulders that you kind of have to climb up, but they look really wide and they look like they're kind of in the center of like this massive mountain. Mm-hmm. When I got to Subdome, I was like, oh fuck. These are a narrow staircase kind of etched into the granite, zigzagging up. And when you're on it, it angles straight out to the side where there is nothing in front of you but blue sky, which if you're freaked out from the height of it, there's no sense of like safety or reality that's hitting you. Mm-hmm. There's no trees. There's no sign of like life. It's just rock, blue sky.
Right.
And for whatever reason, I was super freaked out by that. And I was like down low. I'm like, oh fuck, if I stand up right now, I don't know, like all of a sudden I lost trust in my legs and I'm like, oh fuck. And I started panicking, right? And Philip's like trying to talk me out of it. And he's like, no, like you're good. Madison's already up there. Like take a deep breath. Like you can absolutely do this. Like why couldn't you? And then that started freaking me out more because I was like, I honestly don't want to do this. Like I just want to go back down. And he's trying to encourage me. But when you're really freaked out and someone's encouraging you, you try to like shut off what your intuition's telling you and you try to listen to what they're saying, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, okay, oh, fuck, like let's just keep going then. And so I would continue up, but then every time I would take my eyes off of the granite 3 inches in front of my foot and I would try to gain perspective of like, where is this path going? I'd catch the blue sky and the edge and I'd go right back into my freak out. Mm-hmm. So it took me a really long time to get up to the point where Madison said the stairs disappeared. And at that point, when the stairs disappeared, it's in my head, it was very vertical. And there was just like this edge cresting over the top and then nothing around me. But I look down and there's just like steep granite and I'm like, oh my God. I'm not enjoying any part of this right now. And I wish that I was because logically I know, okay, you're safe right now. You can trust your body. You're fucking fit. You're capable. You've got it. But it's like all of that logic left my brain at that point because fear was my main driver. And there was no sense that could be talked into me. My body was sending me like, imagine all of your red fire, like systems, alert. It was like everything in my brain was saying, go down now. And I'm like really freaking out. And Philip's like, it's right there, Tess. Like you're literally, if you walk maybe 20 more feet up this, you're going to be fine. And then these really avid, what I think are avid climbers, they come down. She's got no backpack, just gloves and her shoes. And she's
badass
walking, no, not even on the steps where I am because there's no steps anymore. She's just walking down the face of the granite. And I'm like, I'm so sorry to make you walk out there right now. And she's like, no, honey, you're so okay. Like, I know this is a really tough spot. And I'm just thinking, God damn it. Like, I just don't even want to be in my body anymore right now. Like, I'm just so done with this experience. Mm-hmm. If I'm having this moment on this part of the subdome, there's not even a chance I'm going to attempt to take the cables. Like, there's just no fucking way.
Yeah.
This is so bad for me that's going to push me over the edge. And what's the point? If you're not enjoying it, I understand like physical challenges, mental challenges are not always enjoyable. And there is something to be said for accomplishing it anyways. Mm-hmm. But when I'm like borderline panic attack, it just did not make sense for me to keep going.
Yeah.
So I like looked at Philip and I was like, okay, you're going to finish this. There is no, I'm so paralyzed by my fear right now. There's not even another step I can take. I'm sorry. Like that is my reality right now. And I wish that I was out of it, but I'm not. I'm going to turn around. I'm going to go down. You're going to go up with Madison. She needs you. Please just go. I love you. Don't let anything happen to you. Mm-hmm. And he's like, oh, fuck. He's like, I want to walk you down. And I'm like, no, because now it's going to take even longer.
Yeah.
Just like go, trust that I'm going to go down. I got it. You go up. And so you guys continued on. Do you want to share about that?
Yeah. So I definitely do want to share. It's interesting to like hear about your experience and the difference of me on that mountain. Like, I'm happy that you shared that. So thank you. Because that's like obviously a really tough thing to share. And I'm walking up. I'm trying to text Phil as I'm walking up the rock. I'm like, we have service up here. Like, let me know what's happening with you guys. So I get to the top and of the subdome, and then you kind of there's a little dip, and then you see the cable climbs going up actual like half dome. And I'm looking at the bottom of the cables and I'm just like, oh my fucking God. How can anyone do that? Like that, this is insane. But in my head, I'm like, I'm just going to do it. If I sit at the bottom of this and I think about it too much, like I won't do it. So I'm putting on my gloves and I'm like looking behind me because Phil didn't text me back. I'm like, I don't know what's going on, like if they're going to come up or not. And so I go back to the bottom of the cables and I look at them. I'm like, okay, just one more time. I'm going to turn around and see if he's there. So then I turn around, he's not there. And I walk up a little bit and I'm like peeking over. And then I was like, let me just check my phone. And then I checked my phone. He was calling at that exact moment. And I was like, okay, amazing. He's like, I'm almost there. And then he like comes up the top of this little dome. And I was like, okay, hell yeah, like let's go. And then we both look at it and I was like, well, do you want to eat lunch? And he's like, there's no way I'm putting any food in my body right now. And I was like, yeah, I agree with you. And I was like, okay, you want to do it? And I looked at him and he was like, I mean, yeah, let's go. And I was like, okay, so we're putting on our gloves and I went in front of him and we started climbing, and I feel like not a lot of thought went into it. Like I looked at the top of it and I was like, okay, I don't know how many feet it is, but it's not like too bad. But like at the top, it does start to get super steep. Like you're like climbing, like I can't do it with the mic in my hand, but you're like climbing straight up. And it was nice to have Phil. Like I'm glad that Tess like told him like Madison needs you, because I was prepared. Like I was psyching myself up and I was like, okay, I can do this. Like if I have to do this by myself, I'll make friends. Like even just seeing humans on here and like knowing that they've accomplished it too, like this already makes me feel better. So I could do it by myself, but it was really nice to have Phil, because like every time I'd stop going up, he'd be like, you good? And I'm like, yeah, I needed that. Thank you. So we're walking up it and they're like these little wood slats, which I guess that they used to have. They didn't have as many as they had when we were there, which thank God they, I guess, replaced some. And so they put some in. So it was nice to like not just be walking on the rock, but you're walking, like you had to step up when you got to go onto the wood slats. And gloves are necessary. Like you actually need them, in my opinion. And we're walking up it and I just wasn't looking, like I'm only looking at my feet and like a little bit ahead of me, and thank God there are like people up there, because I didn't want to like look off to the sides and being like, where am I in space? Like let me look back. Like absolutely not. That's just like, why look back? You're not going that way yet. So we're walking up and I'm taking breaks, and like there are these kind of like step ups, as I was explaining, with the wood slats, and like I was physically like grunting. Like it was not easy. Like you had to use a lot of your upper body strength, and I'm like, again, no one told me that either. Not that I was seeking out that information, but we get to the top finally, you're nearing it. And then as you come to the top, it's just like this expansive space on top of the mountain. And like when I was up there, I was like, all right, like I was excited, you know, and I wasn't thinking about the way back because I just, you know, wasn't there yet. And so we're walking up there. There's a ton of people up there, which is shocking actually. And I looked at Phil and I was like, okay, we're going to go back down, but I want to take a photo on this one rock that like overlooks the entire valley, because my uncle explained of like, he was like crawling to the edge, and I was like, okay, let me just go walk on it. So I walk on it, and Phil, I'm like, okay, you good? And he's like far away, and I'm like, okay, just take a few pictures. I'm like sitting on it, like looking over it, whatever. And then I come back and I was like, how did the pictures turn out? And he was like, I don't know, I was shaking so bad taking your photo, like they might be really bad. And I was like, you were shaking? He was like, yeah, I was scared for you on that rock. And I was like, oh, that's so cute. I was like, it's fine. So then I got him to stand on it too, and that was good because he was fearful of that, and everything was fine. And then it was time to go down, and I remember looking at it, and it's just like not a lot of thought went into my brain except for like, we can do this. We already accomplished going up it. So like, you should be proud of that. Now you can go down. And it ended up being fine. But on the way down, there was so much traffic coming up. I feel like that was like the most scary part. It's like, you want to make your way down and just keep going. But I was just standing there and had to wait because people were passing me and like their backpacks are rubbing against you. And you're just like, oh God, please. And we were laughing because Phil was like, whoever made this, like put the cables on this mountain, is fucked up, because like now we want to accomplish it because they're just there. And I'm like, yeah, that's a good point. And yeah, I feel like I don't know. It's kind of like, not that it's like a blur, but like I just remember going down it and just like feeling strong, you know, like that's all I felt. And I'm really proud of that. And I feel like I need to like digest the experience more, because yeah, just like is cool. Like I was trying to explain it to my mom and my dad of like, it's cool to have wanted to do something since you were a kid, and then you got to complete it as an adult, where you have like so much appreciation for the experience and like your hard work. And that gives you like almost, and this is me overanalyzing it probably, but it gives you like a deeper sense of confidence like within yourself of like, if I'm recently been having like anxiety going on walks by myself, which I've explained to like my friends around me, but I have, and now I'm like, no, but you just like hike the cables at Half Dome. Like you can actually do a lot of stuff that you set your mind out to do. And that's a really cool feeling. And I think feeling that accomplishment with something that's physical, I've never felt that before because I've never done like a feat that's that intense. So to have that now in like my tool belt and like in my heart, I feel like I can do anything. And that's really cool. And then I remember coming down at the bottom and we got to the subdome again, and then Phil and I just like looked at each other and we took off our gloves and he went like this, and then we high-fived and fist pumped, and I was like, dude, that was sick. And then yeah, we walked down and met Tess. And like as you're walking down, it's like I was looking at Phil in front of me because mine were doing this too, but like we're walking down the granite steps after the cable climbs and our legs are like shaking, you know, because it's just like the adrenaline, and also you're so fucking tired. I was just like, oh my God, like the body is truly amazing that we can do things like that. And I know that there are more physically challenging things, but that's just like the hardest thing I've ever done. So that's the only example I have.
Yeah. It's so awesome. Good job.
Thank you.
I was telling you and Philip, I'm like so proud of them for doing it, and having experienced it myself and knowing like really like what it entails, like seeing it in person, and just even having like hiked those 2 days back to back and getting up to the subdome, and like, okay, the subdome is one whole thing. And then the cables are literally like beyond my comprehension. Like it's not something that I was capable of at that moment. It's even more impressive. Like if you hear of people doing it, you're like, wow, that's really badass. But then when you're physically there in person and you're seeing it, the
when
magnitude,
you see it, it's
something else.
It's insane.
When I was waiting down at the bottom of the subdome for them, I like tried calling both my dad and my mom. My dad didn't answer. Thank God my mom did, because we talked through it. And like, as you can imagine, it's really like you go through a lot of emotion when you're not completing what you set out to do. Like sitting here listening to how Madison like feels so accomplished and all that. Like I don't have that. And that's really like a big pill to swallow. And so being able to talk to my mom about it, and her just being like, everyone is different and you cannot compare yourself, and you should feel accomplished for what you did achieve. And like, so that's not your goal today, and that's okay. And like, there's other things that are your goal today.
Right.
And so like just kind of recalibrating me was so helpful. And it also took my anxiety off of what Philip and Madison were like at that moment doing, because it's like two of the people I love the most climbing arguably one of the most dangerous things that we have.
Yeah, like we were risking our life up there, which is insane.
Yeah, and we're not naive to the fact that a young girl just like perished on it a few weeks ago.
Yeah, and speaking of this, when me and Phil were walking down, there was this woman and this other man who I guess was a ranger in the park was walking in front of us, and the woman turned around and she starts talking about the person who the daughter, the girl who just fell and died when she was hiking with her dad. Like she was like, yeah, someone just died on this 2 weeks ago. And Phil looks back at me and I'm like, why are we talking about this right now? Yeah. But then I also thought like, well, it is really good to be aware of that too, because we are essentially risking our lives. Like if I let go, I would die, you know? So it's like good to also have that in your head, and like, what are we hiding from anyway? But I just thought it was like so interesting that like at that moment she was like, yeah, someone just died on this. I was like, yep. Okay. Thank you. I'm aware of that. We can let's not talk about it anymore. Yeah.
But like sitting at the bottom, like just time felt like it was dragging on, because I'm just waiting to make sure they're safe. And it like, I knew, okay, the subdome takes about, they say like on the sign at the bottom, subdome takes 30 minutes, half dome takes 30. So you factor all of that. And I should see them within like the next hour and a half, because they're probably faster than like the average. Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, like I should see them here pretty soon. And like when I wasn't, and I had already hung up with my mom, I'm like, oh my God, like I'm thinking I need to go ask the ranger, like, has anything happened? But there's no ranger at the cables. So there's not going to be any form of communication.
Yeah, there's no authority. There's nothing up there. You're just on your own. It's crazy.
Yeah, there's no one like regulating who's going up. It's not like a freeway system where it gets funneled in. Like it's just a fucking free for all.
Yeah, everyone's just like, you're on your own.
Yeah. But luckily, right as I started like really thinking about things and like getting a little bit more nervous, and then I would come down from that and be like, no, they're like so strong and capable and confident. Like they've got this. Nothing's happened to them. I would know about it. There would be people.
Yes.
I would hear commotion.
Totally.
Right as I like started getting fussy and stood up and like was walking towards the subdome, because I was going to climb back up the subdome. and like come find you guys.
Mm-hmm.
You guys, I could see you coming down. I'm like, oh my God, thank God.
Yeah.
They're here. Yes. Like all fine. Boom. Done. Now I can like fully relax.
Yeah, totally.
But then when you reunite, like as someone who didn't accomplish it, it's difficult to like see the people that you love and they did. And you like have this like total 50-50 of like, I'm so happy for you and I want to hear all about it. And at the same time, I don't want to hear a word about it because like I just am so hard on myself right now. Like this is just, I just need like a second,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And I think that comes from being someone who's like really, like I really try to push myself with things and like I continue to push myself and I was just like, it wasn't working. And to feel that sense of defeat was just so frustrating.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, I wanted to honor what you guys just put yourselves through. So then like, I'm trying to put my shit aside to make sure that like, I'm celebrating what you guys just did.
Yeah.
And so it's like, oh fuck, like I've got to wear both hats and like try to take this other hat off because like, no, there's no room for it right now.
Right. Yeah. I can imagine how challenging that is. And also we've all been there with that too, you know? I think that's also just like is a good lesson because if we're speaking on even like the zooming out perspective of like you were being really hard on yourself in that moment, but if we just like zoom out and be like, okay, if we're looking at this hike as an overall, like that was just one moment where it was really intense and you felt hard on yourself and you're disappointed, but let's just round out and make the whole hike good. And you kind of did reach that point after a little bit. And I think you're just like talking yourself down in your head. Because it was, you know, not outwardly. We kind of like talked about it a little bit. And me and Phil obviously were very aware of how you were feeling. So we didn't want to like overshare anything of like our joy at the top. And then I was kind of thinking about that too, of like how when you guys got engaged and you didn't want to share about it because out of fear of like how other people would take it. And so I was thinking about that on the hike too, because I was like, man, I don't want to be like too happy because like I don't want to make Tess feel bad right now. So I'll just like be really quiet. And I was like, you know what? No, like sharing your joy, like that's how we get other people amped up to go. Like you're allowed to share your joy and be happy about something that you just accomplished. And I think like the moment that I figured that out within myself, like you also snapped to it too. And then we could all communicate about like what we were feeling and it really worked out. Yeah. So moral of the story is if you want to get closer to the people around you, you should go on a hike. That's really challenging. And even if you just want to do it yourself, you need to do it because it's not only like a physical feat, but also mentally you learn a lot about yourself. And maybe sometimes it's not something that you want to learn and it's not as pretty as you think it is, but it's helpful moving forward in life.
Yeah, it is. It's just really humbling at times, you know? When you like I know that side of me intimately where I'm like, oof, she came out this weekend. That side that's like super fearful and like paralyzed by it and like just angry at herself, angry at the world. Like that Tess I've met a couple times and I don't love her, but like I'm trying to accept her more, but like I don't want to see her as often.
Right.
And I don't like love that she made herself known on like such a big moment. Yeah.
Oh yeah, but you shouldn't be hard on yourself. I'm like, oh, I just want to hug you. She'll start crying.
Yeah.
And I think that, I mean, thank you so much for sharing that. But I think also you saying that you don't love that person, I understand that because it's hard to love things that you deem as being, you know, disappointing, especially if it's affecting the people around you. However, I do believe that you can grow to love that person because having that light shown on that aspect of Tess is really helpful for how you want to be like as a person as a whole, because like that just is a part of you. And now you really do know that and the light was shown on it. And so you're like, okay, how can I coddle this part of Tess and be like, it's okay. You know, like it is okay. Because that just is a part of you and you don't need to hide it because it does make you who you are, who is fucking awesome. And like you can conquer the world. You just have moments of doubt, like all of us do. And not to like have this be like a pep talk and, you know, have this episode turn into that. But I just want to make you aware of that like that's not something to be embarrassed of or disappointed of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you guys heard me talk about like when I got engaged, how I didn't want to share it. And like everyone around me was like, what? No, like do it. And then to be on the opposite side of it, where like you hear that people didn't want to share their joy because they didn't want to make you feel worse about yourself. Like that's not at all who I want to be or like what I would ever want for anyone in my presence. And then, I mean, like Madison was saying, like I did snap out of it. I had to like express, like there was the initial moment where I just needed to be by myself and like, whew, okay, get yourself out of the heightened state and think about like what actually is happening here. And like, you're fine. And like, yes, this is something you really wanted for yourself. And no, you didn't do it. But like, bigger picture, is it that big of a deal? No, it's not. But what the part that was like hardest for me was reflecting on like how I was in the moment. Because I take such care of like how I am around people that I love. And I wasn't great. God damn it.
No, it's okay.
Yeah.
Well, and I just want to say that like no one was faulting you for that, like in the moment. You know, I think we're all just trying to work through our own things and trying to be like, because we all love each other so much, we're trying to be respectful of one another. So then that's when like we played the silent game for a little bit. But I think that it is important that we do have these honest conversations to express all of these things, so we're just more aware of each other and like how we can better be a family, you know. And I also think it's important to note that we all self-regulated in that moment too. You know, because like sometimes things just don't need to be talked about. And like you're saying, you need to go internal or like inside and try to figure your stuff out.
Yeah.
So you did a good job at that, you know?
Thank you.
Yeah. Even if you don't feel like you didn't, like you did.
Yeah. You know, when you just are like so hot from crying, like you're like sweaty and just so you just don't feel good.
Yes.
That's me right now. But that's okay. At least you guys get like the full picture of us. Yeah, I don't know. Like this weekend, as beautiful as it was, and like all the happy memories that I have of it, and like I know deep down, like this was so important for me, and even in terms of like not just like making great memories with people I love, but also for growth. I don't want to like there's two parts of me that's like just accept it for what it was and like move on. It was just like a hike that you didn't finish and like that's not that big of a deal. And then there's the other part of me that's like, no, learn from this and like what do you need to analyze? Like pick it apart more.
Right.
So I kind of flip-flop, but like last night it's just like, again, you were saying like emotions get so heightened when you're physically challenged like that, like to the 10th degree. At least they were for me. Like I don't think it was a super emotional time for you. Maybe it was, but like for me, I was just like,
in a different
what's
way
going on? Yeah.
Yeah.
That last night I just needed to like turn off. Like, let's just go get groceries. Let's just go get dinner. Let's go see the beach. Let's come home and shower. Like, I just need to not talk. I need to not exist. I just need to like wind down. So much reflection. Yeah. It was wild. And like in my head, I was thinking, okay, you turn 30, you're going to go do this like amazing physical feat and you're just going to feel so accomplished. And I'm trying to like bring myself back to that state of like this, like you got the experience and like that is enough. Like the cables didn't need to be the experience.
Right.
But we had been hyping it up and talking about it so fucking much. Like even on this podcast that like I had this sense of like I had something to prove. I had to like live up to it. I had to do it in order to consider it done.
Right.
That when I didn't hit that, there was just like, it felt like the weight of the world. And like, I know it doesn't matter. I know no one gives a shit if I do it or not.
Right.
But it's like not about anyone else. It's about me. And like, I make promises to myself and I do my best to keep them. And then when you don't keep them, you're just like, like your confidence gets knocked.
Yeah. I understand that, especially when you feel like eyes are watching and saying it on the podcast, you know?
Yeah. But I really try to not like associate too much with that. Like,
yeah, good.
Doesn't matter. I really do my best at not caring too much what other people think, except I do care a lot what the people like closest to me think. But you you know, talking to my mom at that moment and like reflecting with my aunt, because my aunt's done it, but she hasn't done the cables. And she was like, I had the same situation, Tess. Like, it just wasn't for me. And I know that in that moment, that was my limit. And I have to make peace with that. Like, it's, what am I going to beat myself up over it? Like, who gives a fuck? Like, you didn't do the cables. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we've just learned a lot. And I've learned other things too, like how Madison's been talking about, like, these are just signals that your body's sending and you don't have to assign a narrative to it. And I think that's a very like easy thing to hear and digest, but it's another thing to put it into motion, especially if it's like a newer concept for you. Like in my experience, like everything I go through physically, I'm open about and I share, and I am starting to come to terms with the fact that I don't need to do that. And it's not that I can't share, like if I'm really going through something with other people around me. I just, like, I made a promise to myself last night, like I'm not gonna do that anymore. Like anything I experience, like kind of keeping it to myself. I told you guys about my toenail, but that's like because it goes with the story. But other than that, you know, it's just, I don't know. There was a lot that I think I went through this weekend that I wasn't expecting to go through, and then that like shakes you a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that, and we've talked about this on the podcast a million times, and how obviously like hardships like this are really beneficial for the greater picture, even though they really suck in the moment to go through. But then I just think like how lucky we are to even have these range of emotions and to figure these things out about ourselves, because once we get to like that brink of like shining light on like the Tess that you don't really admire, or like parts of me that I'm like, that's not my favorite, it does kind of just like aid in the human experience. Like I'm just so fucking grateful for it. And of course, like I'm on the other side and I did this accomplishment. I have these other feelings about like how this weekend was for me. So it's like maybe easier for me to say this in this moment, but also I've gone through hard shit too, like all of us have. And I know that it's worth it on the other side of it.
Yeah.
So I am appreciative that all of this happened, even though in this moment it's just like, God, it's so magnified that it doesn't feel good. But I think that really good things are going to come of this. And you'll reap those benefits. I don't know exactly when, but you will. And we'll look back and be like, damn, all right, that was like the precipice. That was the start of it. Thank God for that.
Yep.
So yeah, but thank you for sharing everything.
Thanks, you too.
Yeah.
We're all really proud of Madison and Philip. Yay. Go Madison and Philip. Honestly, I am. Like, I'm not, like, me sharing what I went through is not to detract from their accomplishment. It was just like to show how wildly different everybody's experience can be doing the exact same thing. Like black and white almost. So, yeah, if you get blockages from fear, like, let's figure it out. Don't be too hard on yourself, but analyze it, you know, figure out what's going on. Where does it come from? What do you need? And do hard shit.
Yeah. And remember that you can do hard shit. And I was telling Tess that, or my example of overcoming a fear, or just developing this sense of trust in my body and like being mentally tough and like, I can do this. It's like 6-7 years ago, I don't know, early 20s, hiked Vasquez Rocks with my dad, which if you don't know what that is, look it up. It's like really mellow, like rocky incline. And I remember walking up it and I was barely like 5 feet walking up it, and I started crying, like having a panic attack. And I was like, literally thought I was going to die. And like in that moment, I remember where I was in life, and I just like wasn't there. I wasn't taking care of myself really well. And not to say that you're not taking care of yourself, but just like mentally in my head, it was not a really good place to be. And so like I was on the rock and I'm like thinking I'm going to die. My dad's trying to talk me like, it's okay. It's like right there. I'm like, Dad, you have to like physically carry me. Like I can't do this. Like I just cannot. And like to go from like that Madison to this Madison now, where I like look at the rock and I'm like, oh, let's fucking go. Like I got this. Like you can change and like alter yourself in a way that is beneficial for your growth and like for you to be able to succeed in something. Like to have that example now in my arsenal, like I truly believe that almost anyone can do that if you put the work in and put your mind to it. So I think that that's also something to look forward to. It is like, oh, things can change, and maybe in 2 years I would want to do the cable climbs, or maybe you won't. Like anything can change and anything is possible, especially if you put your mind to it. Although that's so cliche, like it is cliche for a reason, because I believe that it is true.
Yeah, I mean, the mind leads the body in so many ways. So
yeah, and I think we were both shown that this weekend and how powerful it is, which is, it's intense stuff, truly. So we got a lot of reflection to do, like always.
Yeah,
but we're good over here. Conscious Cowboys, being honest as always. And you know, we're here for the ride. You guys are here for the ride. Thanks for being here and letting us share in this space openly, because it is a really special place to be. Yeah.
I feel like that's it for this week.
Yeah. It is. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you guys next week. Talk soon.
It wouldn't be a goodbye if I didn't wave at you. You know that.
Yeah, that's true.